So public-private keys. I mean, one of the questions really is why do we use this? And the reason that I've moved over to this is because I used to use PHP Storm a lot, and in there I would set up my servers and I would connect via a password using SFTP. Those that know, FTP actually passes the passwords in plain text, so it's not very secure. SFTP is another way, and you can also use SSH with passwords. But public-private keys are a way of authenticating where you have your private key on your machine hidden away, and then you give your public key out. And with that public key, which you place on server or some other third-party remote system, they can then authenticate against your private key. Now, although the public key is public, it's still good practice not to just publish it everywhere. There is no point in putting it everywhere, and also you don't really want to facilitate man-in-the-middle attacks and things like that. So it's good practice to use it when you need it, but not to host it everywhere. And the other thing is, if in doubt, revoke, and we'll come on to that. And also another good practice is to have a rotation of keys. And some of this came up because I do quite a lot of work with, can you F11 the full screen? Oh, right, yes, certainly. Thank you. Is that okay? Is that better? I'll see you now. Anyway, I'll take that as a yes. Let me move the share thing away over here. So what was I saying? Oh, yeah, so I do quite a lot with cybersecurity and have been improving. I do quite a lot of work with the police and been improving some of their security and going through making everything passwordless. So I actually don't use any passwords for logging into any of my Joomla sites. All of my Joomla sites use pass keys, and we've got multi-factor authentication. I often use a YubiKey, and it's just in kind of that practice, I'm trying to get away from all passwords and that sort of system. So here is how to add a public and private key to access VScode in this particular situation on a remote server. You need to set up SSH key-based authentication, and this is a concise guide. So first thing you do is generate the keys on your local machine. And to make sure that the public keys are in the place that you want them, I've actually put them in a particular folder, .ssh. I put .ssh, that goes to the top of my list, and then I have my keys in there. To generate them, you open up a terminal window, and if you're on a Windows machine, then it's the Windows key plus X, and that will bring up a terminal. Actually, I'll do that bit. Let me just keep it X, and there you get your terminal, and you can see the terminals here. Lots of handy things that you can get to there. And so you can put it straight into a particular directory. We can also, and I'll come on to that in a little while, actually specify where the directory is when you're doing the key. So you can actually do it in a different way. So I've gone through one particular setup. So here we're going to actually change directory to my .ssh folder. You can do print working directory, PWD, to actually see where you are. And then on a Windows machine, it's the following to make a key. So SSH keygen -t -RSA, which is type of key, -b, and then the size of the key. And I'm going to break this down and go through what all of these mean. And what that will do is create us a pair of keys straight away, public and private. The private one will just have the name of the file that you have, and the public one will have .pub, PUB, which if you're on a Windows machine and hit it, then it will try and open it in Publisher, which is no use whatsoever. So there are lots of options that you have with the public-private key pair. And they all start with a simple structure of SSH-keygen and then a series of options. So the first option we have is the type of the key, that's the -t, and we're having an RSA key, that's one of many types that you can use. Then you've got the actual size in bits, which in this case is 4096. The bigger the better, the bigger the longer they take to build and make. It's not really an issue on modern laptops size-wise because they're so damn fast, but they used to take much longer in the old days. So we've got the different types here. You've got all of these different types. And in fact, I've seen several systems have actually defaulted on this particular one, but I prefer the RSA. They seem to work better on some of the other things that I'm using. You can do 2048 bits, but I would always do 4K as it's much safer. And then you can specify a file name, so my key, whatever you would want. And so that's -F, and then you can specify the actual key. And then you can also add a comment. So, and this, what happens is when the key is actually made, it's a long string, at the very end will be your comment. And here, a lot of people put their email address as the comment. So it's in there and they can see it's their key and see what's there. Now, one of the security things is a passphrase. So when you come to log in, you will be asked for a passphrase. And that can be anything, a sentence, numbers, simple code. In itself, it's not like a password. It's to stop it just being automatically used and to just stop anyone that got hold of it from being able to use it just like that. So it's like a password on your keys, which we're trying to avoid. But anyway, so passphrase I think is good so that if someone did get hold of it, they can't just use your keys. And then there's lots of other little flags and options, and I'm going to scoot through these because Renee's got a really good talk, and I want to leave plenty of time, and we're a bit shorter because of the Pete Spokes and fun, but that's fine. One of the important ones is -P, which is to change your passphrase. So if you did want to change your passphrase, you can just redo it with a change of passphrase, and that will then rewrite your keys with the new passphrase. So wherever you put them. You can read the key, -Y reads it out, and you can remove the host. And the hosts are actually put into a file so that your system knows where your keys are going to work, all the different hosts, and you can remove them from that with that. And there's various other bits and bobs here. So I'm going to go through the what I then did. So here's a particular string I could use. So we're basically saying the type is an RSA, that's the size of it. I want to put it in my .ssh because I've not changed to that. That's going to be the name of my key, and then I'm going to put my email address at the end, and then that would produce it. And as I said earlier, it produced two keys, your key just like that, which is your private key, and your public key just like that, although it wouldn't have a capital M because that's just the word processor deciding to change it. On the remote server, what you need to do is then put your public, not your private, but your public key there. And I'm using Scala hosting at the moment, been using it for quite a while. I've tried it on several different hosting systems. In their cPanel, you've got two different ways. You can actually do it using the SSH access, but you can also do it by just copying and pasting the file in. I'll explain that. Here is what you would do if you're going to copy the file, the actual commands, and one of the things to bear in mind is some of the Scala hosting tutorials talk about generating your keys with PuTTY. PuTTY by default, PuTTY Gem, if you're using a Windows machine. If you do that, they won't work with VS Code because it's not. It took a while to dig around and find that, because I actually did use PuTTY Gem one time and they just would not work. And eventually I managed to find somewhere that you need the open type of public-private keys, and PuTTY does the wrong type, and so you can't use those with the VS Code in this setup. You can specify in PuTTY that you actually use that type, and you can convert them with PuTTY, but out of the box it will do the wrong type and it won't work. So on Scala host, you can either do this, or you can actually, and I'm going through here how you create you list the files, see if it exists. If it doesn't, then you have to make your folder in your root called .ssh. So you then make your directory, and then you touch it. So touch.ssh/authorized keys, and what that does is it makes the file. So when you touch, and if it's not there, it will then either update the time that it was last viewed, or it will make it if it's not there. So all we're doing here is going onto Scala host, onto your server, and putting in the root a folder called .ssh and then a file called authorized keys. And the important thing is that you don't put your public key in the .ssh folder. It has to be in the authorized keys file. So you have to copy and paste it in. So this is what I'm doing here. I'm opening the permissions of both the folder and the file. I'm changing the user group, and then I would copy the file contents into the file. You could also simply copy and paste the contents into the file, and you can even create it with your file manager if you're using something like cPanel or sPanel on most systems. So you'd go into your public HTML, create a folder called .ssh, create a file called authorized keys, and then paste the content of your public key into the authorized keys, leaving a line for each one so you can have multiple keys. And then here is an example of what you would do in VS Code. So in VS Code, you would go into your VS Code, install the remote SSH extension, and that allows your VS Code to then connect to any extension remotely. And then you would add in the SSH configuration file of VS Code, and you can get to that simply by doing Control, Shift, and P when you're in VS Code. Search for the remote VS Code, open the configuration file, and in there you can add this, and that is a single identity. That's one setup, one configuration. So if you wanted to do another one, it would be simply another one. And this would be what you would see, and I'm going to go to my VS Code in a second just to show you it actually happening. This is what you would see as the identifier of where you're going. In it, you would be putting the host name or the IP, so server 9 in my case, on one of my servers. Then you'd have the username for the account that is on your Scala hosting or wherever it is. Then in Scala, you actually have to change the port. So there is a default port for SSH, but often I've noticed a lot of different server suppliers will provide a different port. And so you have to change it there. And then what we're doing here is we're saying, go and look at my private key, and this is where you'll find it on my machine. And so that's your private key there. And then you can go to the connect in VS Code, open the command palette, choose a remote SSH, connect to the host, and select the configured server, which would be this name here, whichever you configured it. And that's really it. there's one or two little things. Some hosting companies will have a specific switch to switch on SSH. So for example, Scala, it's not actually in the account, it's in the manage where you see all your accounts. At the bottom, you've got a little setting which will be manage SSH accounts. You just go in there and you can switch SSH on or off. And it's always off by default, so you actually have to go in and enable it. Otherwise, none of this will work. And last but not least, I'm going to F11. Right, what do we want? Down here, you can open a remote, and this is what you would see. So if I do connect to a host, I've got my different hosts here. If I hit connect to this one, then it is connecting. It's done all the negotiation, and I'm already in, and I can now use my Explorer. And this is just a blank Joomla site, but you're already in, and you can actually navigate around, and that's it. I heard a bong, and then but I couldn't see anything.
No, no, that was said okay by Phil when I stopped the hand down. My question or my remark was answered by Phil. Phil
Okay, yeah, lots of different. I mean, I use also Plesk. Plesk does it a different way, but you've just got to go through the specific one for the specific setup, and off you go. I must admit, I find since moving over to public-private keys, I found it so much easier. It was Benjamin that nagged me and set some up ages ago, and I've been using them all the time recently, and just found it a joy. And that's why I wanted to write the article and have this conversation. And it's one of those things that if someone holds your hand going through the process, it can take half an hour at the most, and you're done for life. Whereas if you're trying to do it thrashing around and spending 5 hours trying to get a putty public-private key to work on a system that's not going to work with a putty public-private key, it's really, really frustrating. And there are so few YouTube videos out there that explain it properly. It's really interesting how there's very little that actually goes through it properly. So go for it, Dieter. Yeah, and I think you also need to get into the habit of having different public-private keys for each of your entities. I've known some people just using the same ones. And it's a bit like, I mean, I've got one good password. When I ever hear that, I cringe. So, and so you do need to have a different one for every single entity, because you don't want it to, an issue to spread. So, Dieter, Dieter, you got your hand. Yeah. Dieter, you got your hand raised.
Yes. I don't know if I get you all the words right because my English is not so good. Uh, my experience with Putty is very well because even if I go to SSA Linux server, I have to convert that key which is generated by PuTTY to a SSA to an open SSA version, and then it works.
Oh, it will, but you have to convert it. Whereas if you do what I just did,
Yeah,
you don't convert it.
and inside of PuTTY you can convert it.
Totally, but you have to know that, and that's that's the golden
Yes,
thing.
but I have got some instructions, different instructions where it is written down
Right.
to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I found the command line so easy. PowerShell, just open it up,
Yeah,
put in the line, and off we go.
it's everybody's choice.
Yeah.
Someone is more happy with the graphical interface. Another one it's with the command line better.
Mm.
That's each of them can switch it. Everyone can do it in their own, which is best for him.
Yeah. Emmanuel.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I will say though, and it has nothing to do with your presentation. I will say that I kind of think, even though for me I kind of eat and breathe this stuff since that's sort of my background, but I still think that it is way too complicated for the average person. Like it makes me feel of like you know the concept of, oh, let's everyone just transfer money via crypto, and that's just a bloody mess even today where it's a lot easier, and this is still too complicated for the average person. I think that's my opinion. And I think that we will hopefully come to a point where there will be sort of the next evolution that will truly make it a lot easier. A little bit like the passing from passwords, which sites force you into, must be 24 characters and have a capital letter, and must not be made with a password you've had in the last 6 years, and then all of a sudden now you have pass keys with either your eyeball or your fingerprint or some other technology behind it, and that's just so much easier. So hopefully.
Oh yeah, well, I'm just going with what we've got now. So